Hi, I am the Vicar. Welcome. I am an artist who challenges himself often and therefore fails often. I'm going to tell you all about it so you may learn from my mistakes while I talk about how I deal with challenges and how I think they should be surpassed. So, I'm not going to tell you this is a change of mindset kind of deal, in which you just gotta see your failures as stepping stones towards your success, because I have heard often from established artists that failure is a part of the process, that it is necessary in order to learn things, and that you shouldn't be afraid of it. And all of these statements are true. However, there are right ways even to fail. Because if you don't take the proper measures, a failure will leave you only with the frustration instead of an actual lesson. And frustration is the hill where ambitions go to die. What I mean by this is that if you don't choose your battles wisely, you keep on frustrating yourself until you lose interest and eventually give up. So just be careful you don't spend all of your willpower on unachievable goals, okay? Alright, now think about this with me for a little bit. What are the main reasons that would make you take on a challenge? I always think of three right from the get-go. One is to prove to yourself that you can achieve a certain result, which is, normal. Two would be the same, but trying to prove to other people that you can achieve a certain result, which can get a little bit self-destructive in the long term, but let's not open that can of worms right now. And three is to better yourself, to push yourself further in a certain regard. The third one is the one that I want to focus on. So we aren't necessarily going to develop a formula or anything like that, because I don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all solution to creative problems. It's more about coming up with a process that will help you in setting up the right conditions for your own success. What you need to do, in my opinion, is be mindful of the balance of your challenge plus the preparation for your challenge. Balance would be not to tackle too many things at once, or things that you know are completely out of your reach at the moment. It's basically developing a sense of scale. It's knowing yourself well enough so that you won't get in over your head and frustrate yourself for something you already knew you wouldn't be able to do in the first place, right? Now, preparation is about reducing your anxiety of failing as much as you can by getting to know what the challenge is about before facing it. Things like building on necessary skills in order to achieve the result that you want, or building up your reference pool. After all, you can't really paint like a master before you draw your stick figures, So, without balance, you fail for being too greedy. And without preparation, you fail for lack of repertoire. You just can't really be unreasonable when going about this. For instance, in 2022, I made a piece called Summertime Fantasia. It's named after the summer event that Genshin Impact had going on at the time. I wanted it to be big, in scale and in show of technique, because for some reason I thought I was ready to make that sort of leap from the types of things that I was doing at the time. But as you can see with the results, I was not ready for the many challenges that it brought. I had never painted water before, nor had I made a drawing with so many characters together in different points of the perspective. So I had to invest a lot of time into learning everything that was a necessary requirement in my head, which made me waste time and made the piece itself look like an insurmountable challenge at some points, actively making me dread sitting down to try and make some progress. I went too far out of my comfort zone, which showed a lack of balance in the challenge and a lack of preparation, because I didn't have the reference that I needed and because I tried to do too many things at once. With the background, with the water, with the perspective, and so on and so on. Basically, I wasn't mindful of my own limitations. But Vicar, you may ask, is there really any challenge to it if I remain within the boundaries of my current skill set? And that is a very fair assessment. And you would be right to question that. But this is also not necessarily what I'm asking you to do. I do want you to go out of your comfort zone, but I want you to be mindful of what your weaknesses and strengths are, so that you can make the most out of every step that you take. In other words, I want you to be able to expand your comfort zone consistently. Failure is a part of the process, sure, but when you can't take anything out of that failure, you're actively just wasting your time. People will tell you to take things slowly, to ease your way into things and gingerly test out the waters before jumping in, and that is also my advice, and it really works. However, taking it slow and wasting time are two completely different things. You have to set yourself up to be able to look back and see things that will help you get to know yourself a little bit better. Like things that you were doing, things that you need to improve, things that you liked, things that you've disliked. The kind of stuff that you can't get to know if you don't put yourself to the test. So, if you challenge yourself often and don't lose much when you fail, you will teach your brain that it isn't a big deal. This will increase your tolerance to the fear of failure in the future. You will start enjoying the challenge, and that's another key aspect of the process, right? To make it fun. After all, the more skilled you get, the higher the difficulty in the challenges is going to spike. And if it's not fun at that point, you might actually just quit, right? And we don't want that. So, in summation, what do you need to do? First, you need to think about what you want to do in order to exactly know how far you're going to push yourself and how. Second is to prepare for it, so you can take the challenge on without it becoming too much at any given point, by doing things like expanding your repertoire, your visual library for references, and thinking about solutions to the challenge that you might already know with the knowledge that you already possess. And third is to just execute. So the whole idea behind creating this little 3-step process is helping you create your own method of approaching this and setting yourself up for success. When you come up with your own strategy, it helps making this strategy into a habit, and with some practice, it will make you more willing to step out of your comfort zone while ensuring that you will always have some progress to show for it. It also increases the time that you spend thinking about your art and the next steps that you're going to take, which forces you to slow your process down a little bit, and that is always good in my opinion. And on top of all of that, you'll also get out of each experience knowing yourself a little bit better, which is also always a good thing. So basically, the name of the game is play it safe, but not too safe. You have to be the one to gauge the difficulty of each challenge, though, because you are the only one who knows your own limitations. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we've talked about all of that, I am going to show you the full process of this latest piece that I've finished. I'll comment on the decisions that I've made during the making of this piece, and in doing so, my hope is to point out to you where I've made mistakes for a lack of preparation or for a lack of balance. That way I can illustrate to you what I meant during the previous part of the video. So let's get into it, shall we? Here on the sketch, you'll notice that I've tried to frame the character in a certain way. This is because I've been getting inspired a lot recently by Yoneyama Mai's work. There's this technique she uses sometimes in which she uses long lines to indicate a certain flow of movement. She will also use these lines to frame her subject and draw attention to where she wants you to look at. I am trying to achieve something similar. So I'm having the flames spiraling around Burnice, and in doing so I want to lead your eye towards her face and her chest. Obviously, I didn't think I would get it right on the first try. That would be very presumptuous, right? It is a technique from a very skilled artist who has a wealth of experience. I don't think I'll ever reach her at this point in that regard. A man can dream though, right? I didn't have a good grasp on the pose, so you see me change it around a lot. This is because I didn't practice it. I just came up with the concept while studying on paper, and then I just jumped straight into it. Didn't prepare at all. And it's a tricky pose too. The foreshortening got a little extreme because of the angle I chose. This is what makes most of her body disappear behind her chest and makes my mannequin not as good as I wanted it to be. Okay, so while we have the line art going on in the background, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in this piece. Like I said before, I'm using this technique inspired by Yoneyama Mai's work, who is an extremely skilled artist. So it's not as simple as I made it sound when I described it. applying it isn't necessarily easy. I mean, you need to develop a feeling for it, which I did not give myself time to do at all. Besides this, there's the pose being very dynamic, which is also a first time for me. If you look into my previous work, you will notice that I am more about using static poses, as if my characters are about to be photographed, like deliberately posing, is what I mean. The foreshortening in the way that I am doing it here was also a first. Although I have tried this before, pose with the chest hiding other parts of the body. I mean, this here is a little different, and that's because of the movement implied by the way the pose is constructed. She's puffing out her chest, her spine is arched at the same time that she is sticking out her neck. So there's a clear line of action. So it got tricky and difficult to manage at times. What that shows you is a lack of preparation, by specifically having a lack of practice. I did draw this pose only once before on paper, and not only that, I did not study Burnice's design beforehand at all, so I needed to keep on checking the reference at all times. What's more, this was also my first time painting fire, like ever. I didn't even understand fire visually as a phenomenon before getting into this piece. And what I mean with all of this that I've just listed is that I was trying to tackle too many new things at once for the first time. And it clearly shows when I have to constantly adapt things, when I am getting things wrong in the way that I did. It adds up and gets me frustrated when I get further down the road during rendering and stuff. I mean, I'll have, for instance, all my flats in place, I'll have half of my shading done, and then I'll notice a blunder. Then I'll be like, oh, how the hell do I fix this? I am sure we've all been there. So, yeah, it did frustrate me a little bit. This is the way that you create frustration for yourself. I was super excited about this one and just wanted to jump straight in. Wanted to, just have fun drawing a fun character, and I ended up frustrating myself for being too greedy with all the stuff that I wanted to do. I won't say that I regret it, because I did get a lot out of it. But at the same time, the experience could have been a lot smoother, a lot better, is what I mean. So, fire. Fire is a very interesting element to paint, because fire is shapeless, but not like water is shapeless. Whereas water takes the shape of wherever it is contained, fire is just like a burst of energy coming out of something that's exuding heat. It's really cool because you can just give it any shape based on whatever's burning, so you get a lot of variety. To get a better feel for how it worked, I looked at some references of how different things burned, like how fuel fire looks and how other solid material burns. Here you can see me trying out the spiral motif that I wanted to be all around Burnice. Of course, I didn't prepare for this, so I try different few approaches. end up settling on a textured brush that gives a nice idea of flow and a bunch of layer effects to get the right colors to show up. Fuel fire wouldn't really help me in this piece to get the motif going, I mean, so I decided to represent it with a mix of ribbon shapes and the colors on fuel burning. With things like Nycto, the area closest to where the fuel is coming out will burn white because the heat there is very intense. And then it will gradually change into this gradient of various colors until it reaches the usual yellows, oranges, and reds. Not practicing this before actually hindered my progress, because you need the experience with something before you can paint it convincingly, right? If you don't get that experience before you start, you'll have to get it during the process. You can't cheat that order, unfortunately. But yeah, the ribbon shapes make it easier to manipulate how they look and how I can place them into the canvas. That way I could do the thing of leading the viewer's eye. These flames, they don't look like flamethrower flames at all though. This is more like a fireplace fire, which is the reference I used actually. Here at the end I add a little more intensity as an effect, but later on I'll remove it because it looked too amateurish with all that overlay. Here you see me doing a little bit of lighting that comes from the flames. I've actually made a big blunder here because I should have done it on top of the flats instead of the silhouette. Because I'm using these very soft, subtle colors, right? So what happens is when I turn on the flats, these colors are going to be too bright. In some places, they even kind of disappear. This comes from a lack of practice because I don't finish a lot of stuff, I gotta be honest. I practice a lot on paper, but there I'll just leave it on Lineart. At the most I'll do a little hatching. But now that I've decided to use more digital and get better at it, these are things I need to be aware of. On Burnice's skin, you can see that the lighting is too similar to her skin tone. With the rendering it shows up a little bit more, but it has no impact. I've been using a textured brush for the shading on this one, but I don't know. I used to use the airbrush, but I'm liking this one a lot better. Maybe it's the feel of the brush. Here you see that I've even tested out getting her skin a little redder to see if the lighting would look better, but it ended up feeling weird, so I just reverted it back to the pale skin tone. Okay, so while the rendering is going at 4,000 times the normal speed back there, let me talk a little bit about how these little things I haven't prepared for nor checked the balance for made this piece a lot more challenging than it needed to be. As I've mentioned, I went into this trying out a lot of firsts, so it took me several experiments to get stuff right. You could argue that this is a part of the process because sometimes you envision something and you can't properly translate that to the canvas right away. We all go through it, right? But the truth is that all that experimentation and research didn't need to be done during the making of the piece. I kept getting frustrated because I kept trying things and not getting the results I wanted. That made me a lot less willing to just sit down and try to make some progress. So usually I have about 1 to 2 hours a day to dedicate to my art because of my job. So if I sit down to do something and I can't see progress, I get a little irritated with myself, because somehow my brain registers this as me being insufficient. But in truth, this is just a lack of experience, right? This is something we need to remind ourselves of constantly, because I'm telling you all of this in order to help you avoid frustration. But this avoidance is just so you can keep excited about creating art, so you can keep on drawing, keep on painting, because it's important to keep at it. Persistence is what will make you get there. And this is how it works with every creative endeavor. So, the lack of preparation also dropped the quality of the piece a lot. I had to kinda ignore a lot of details on Burnice so I could make it all work. Also, to be a little more expedient. The whole thing took me many sessions to finish, and there were also the days I had to use that 1 to 2 hour window to research for the next part of the piece I wasn't sure of how to do. Things could have not only been faster, but they could have been more comfortable. But spending time with a single piece is absolutely fine. Even if you take a long time to do something, as long as you are always progressing or having fun, I think it's a great way to spend your time. That's all part of being creative. What irritates me is wasting time. Knowing that I could have made things easier for myself if I had spent a bit more time preparing really gets to me. So you can see how different it is when I am doing something I'm familiar with, like with these metallic accessories and parts on her clothes. You see me breeze right through them. That's because metal is a material I've been working with for a couple years already, so it comes to me fairly easy. This is what I mean. Wasting time is a no-go. Spending time with your piece? Heck yeah, that's for sure. So, detail everything, render meticulously, just take your time and have fun. Art is about expressing what you have inside, about showing what you feel. It's also about, showing the beauty you have inside of you. So if you want to take things slowly, then you absolutely should, friend. With all of this said, there's another thing I wanted to talk about, which is willingly taking the longer or harder way of doing things as a challenge. You see, the way I render hair is kinda long. I first use broad strokes with a textured brush. then I come back erasing it in triangles so that the color that is under the brightest value can show. It's kind of like sculpting it. It takes a while, but I just love how it looks afterwards. And then I'll, after all of that, I'll just come using a darker color to bring out the brighter value even more. It definitely takes longer than just putting down flat colors, then getting some shading done, and then putting a halo-like highlight on top of the character's head, independent from the lighting of the scene. And the only reason I do it is because it's fun to me, and I just love the way it looks. Deliberately choosing the longer or a harder way to do something is no challenge at all. A challenge should be about opening up new and bigger possibilities for you, and not about just bashing your skull against a concrete wall trying to do things in a more difficult way. If you don't care about the result of that process specifically and would rather do it in a more efficient way, then just do it. You won't be any less of an artist for it. Okay, now all we have left are the final touch-ups and the rendering of the eyes. Fixing some details and stuff. So let's make a conclusion to the whole process. What we can get out of all of this is that it was incredibly naive of me to try and do a whole bunch of things without preparing for them first. This is my main mistake. I am greedy, I confess. You should plan your art pieces, especially if they are, big ones like this one was for me, with so many new subjects at once. Naturally, breaking it down in a few more pieces to practice one aspect at a time might be optimal, but if you still want to do many things at once, you absolutely can. Just make sure you prepare for it. Practice first, plan out what you're going to do, just so you don't sit down staring at your piece and thinking things like, well, now what? Right? So, between my summertime Fantasia and the Burnice, there are 2 whole years. I kept making the same mistake with every big piece that I've made in that time, and only noticed it now at the end of 2024. So I wanted to put this out there for any friends that might have processes that are doing them more harm than good, like mine was. Because sometimes we get so engrossed in our own ideas and processes, just so comfortable in some bad habits, that we forget to take a step back and look at everything in a more objective light. This is the same even with work that isn't creative, by the way. Sometimes you're just running into dead ends all the time until you detach yourself a little out of what you're doing. Then stop, analyze it, and only then plan out your strategy. This is what I want you to do. I want you to have structure. So like I said before, play it safe, but not too safe. Just make sure that you do your best to keep on loving what you do and have fun with the process. Alright? Okay. That's all I wanted to talk to you about for today. I hope you do take care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.